we go. Please rise to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, may I have the Open Publics Meetings Act statement, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in compliance with NJSA 10:4, the Open Public Meetings Act, and in accord with DCA guidelines related to virtual meetings, this regularly scheduled meeting of the Jackson Township Planning Board has been published and posted in all appropriate locations.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
For Monday, September 21st, 2020, the Jackson Township Planning Board meeting, Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Mr. Riker is absent this evening. Mr. Nigro? Mr. Justwicki is absent this evening. Mr. Wall?
Here.
Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Mr. Riccardi?
Here.
Mr. Herring?
Here.
Mr. Hudak?
Here. Okay, we have some quick business to do. We have an executive session. I don't think it should take more than 10 or 15 minutes. So may I have a motion, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Whereas the Planning Board of the Township of Jackson is subject to certain requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4, provides that an executive session not open to the public may be held for certain specified purposes when authorized by resolution. And whereas it is necessary for the Planning Board of the Township of Jackson to discuss in session not open to the public certain matters related to the item or items authorized by NJSA 10:4 and designated as matters related to litigation, negotiations, and/or attorney-client privilege, particularly the Jackson Trails and Jackson Park matters. Now, therefore, be it resolved by vote by the Jackson Township Planning Board that it is authorized to enter into executive session.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Yes. Dr. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Nigro?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Riccardi?
Yes.
Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak, before, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we should just, if you could announce an estimated time for the public that you expect to return so that they know to turn back on.
As I stated before
Oh, sorry.
you spoke, I said 10 to 15 minutes.
So,
So let's say 10 of, we should be back 10 to 8, at the latest 5 to 8. Okay? All right, thank you. May I have a motion for the payment of voucher recording secretary for this evening, September 21st, 2020, please?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. May I have any comments or questions or updates for the minutes from the August 17th regular meeting? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, resolutions. We have a couple of resolutions. The first one is block 22010, lot 6, Burke Holdings LLC. Counselor?
yes, Mr. Chairman, that's resolution number 2020-13. It's a resolution granting the amended major site plan for Burke Holdings. The board will recall what that resolution at the end of the day really does is set up an administrative process to monitor the rental of that site. And they were looking to amend a condition at that period of time. The board voted in favor of that administrative process.
Anyone care to motion?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes. Next up, we have block 7001, lot 23.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's resolution number 2020-14. It's a time extension to the applicant developer on 84 Valley Road. Minor subdivision time extension.
Any comment?
He's looking for 1 year.
Yes.
Anyone care to make a motion? And roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Nigro? Yes. Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yeah.
Mr. Riccardi?
Yes.
Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Was I absent that day?
Yes.
So, I'm not so sure.
I don't think so, but it's okay. Next up, we have block 21202, lots 6.01 and 7, aisle 9 grocery store.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's resolution 2020-15. It's granting amended preliminary and final site plan approval with variance relief for that grocery store. It's the, folks will recall, it's the center of the 3-building complex on East Veterans Highway and Hope Chapel Road of import there. The applicant agreed, and I appreciate both Mr. Klee and Mr. Peters' assistance. The applicant agreed to update traffic studies to submit to the township and to the county, because it's really a county intersection, because I think you can almost take judicial notice of the fact that that particular intersection continues to get worse. But so that's incorporated as a condition of approval.
Thank you. Anyone care to make a motion?
I have a question first.
Certainly.
Ernie, did they get the loading dock straightened out on the back end? Your satisfaction?
They haven't submitted revised plans yet.
Okay.
That is a condition of approval also.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a condition of approval. You okay with that? All right. Anyone care to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Nigro? Yes. Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Riccardi?
Yes.
Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes. And lastly, we have block 6501, lot 42.03, Safe Store Land Company LLC.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's resolution 2020-16. That's the approval of a mini self-storage facility in the municipality. The board will recall, and again, it's a condition of approval. Again, trying to hit highlights. Everyone had the opportunity to review the resolution. That they've agreed to green bank parking spaces.
Okay. Anyone care to make a motion?
Yes. So move to approve. Sorry.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Nigro?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Riccardi?
I don't think he was.
Oh, my apologies. Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes.
That was my error.
Okay, thank you. Changes, Denise, to the schedule, anything? Thank you. Board matters, anybody have anything? No? Okay. Our first application this evening, block 20101, lot 30, Sam's Road subdivision. Mr. Klee, you want to lead that off?
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. It's an application for preliminary and final major subdivision. The applicant is proposing to establish 5 residential building lots and 1 stormwater management lot on the subject property. It's a 8.21 acre tract. It's wooded, and it's located on the westerly and terminus end of Sam's Road within the R-1 zoning district. Variance approval will be required for the stormwater basin lot, for deficient lot area, and deficient lot width. So, of course, some testimony from the applicant in support of that variance request. The application is subject to the residential site improvement standards. Curbs and sidewalks are being provided adjacent to the roadway. 30 feet of pavement is proposed. There is a small section on lot 2.06 where sidewalk is not proposed. So some testimony from the applicant regarding the reasoning behind that. The project is subject to or is impacted by the conservation overlay zone. The applicant has provided a current letter of interpretation verifying the location of the wetlands and associated buffers. We should have some testimony from the applicant regarding the environmental issues, his proposals for mitigating, as well as any comments that were received from the local environmental commission. We reviewed the roadway as well as lot grading and find them to be acceptable and take no exception. The project does involve the stormwater management lot, which is designated to be owned and maintained by the township. Our review of the calculations indicate that this project or the stormwater management design is in accordance with ordinance standards and is acceptable. The applicant is proposing street lighting in accordance with ordinance standards. So some testimony from the applicant to assure that the lighting design complies with ordinance standards. A landscaping plan has been submitted. Street trees are being provided in accordance with ordinance standards. Some testimony from the applicant regarding the extent of screening that's going to be provided for the proposed drainage basin. Really, a concern relates to the existing conditions of Sam's Road. This is at the end of Sam's Road, and just some testimony from the applicant regarding the existing conditions of the pavement and its connection to Gale Chambers, as well as his proposals for the existing Sam's Road right-of-way. It's indicated that that right-of-way is going to be vacated. So some testimony from the applicant regarding the township's position on that vacation. We provided some technical comments to the applicant. That's all at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a report dated September 11th. The property is located in the R1 residential zoning district where single-family detached dwellings are a permitted use, which is why they're here this evening. If you recall, the R1 zoning district required for subdivisions after 2010 to comply with the R3 zoning standards unless they're connected to public sewer. As this site proposes public sewer, they are in fact entitled to follow the R1 zone standards. And Mr. Klee had read my report. There are two variances, one for the detention basin lot area and one for the detention basin lot depth. And almost as an aside or a little bit of kidding, we did ask the applicant to verify the amount of fill that's coming to the site. That's all.
Thank you. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. The applicant, County Line Construction, is a local company owned by Peter Kate, who's seated behind me. Our engineer is Al Udakis from Borough Engineering. I apologize. Is it okay that he stays here, or do you need him up at the dais? Used to sitting at the same table. It's up to you. Is that right, staying here?
That's fine.
All right. We don't intend on calling Mr. Kate as a witness, but if testimony is required of him during the course of the testimony, we'll bring him up. So the only witness we really need to be sworn is Mr. Udakis.
If you'd raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony and information you're about to give is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Can you kindly give us your full name, spell your last, and your affiliation, please?
Albert Yodakis, Yodakis. I'm president and CEO of Borough, Boro Engineering, based in Cold Snake, New Jersey. I have testified before this board before, or would you like me to be qualified? Okay. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland since 2003. I'm a licensed professional planner as of 2007. Also certified municipal engineer, certified public works manager, graduate of Lehigh University with a degree in civil engineering. Over 20 years experience in the state of New Jersey in civil engineering.
We accept your credentials.
Thank you.
rather than me handing the microphone back and forth, Mr. Udakis, would you run through the board, identify where the property is located, and then run through the application, please?
Absolutely. I have two exhibits tonight. Would you like me to mark those now?
Yes, please.
First exhibit is entitled Aerial Display Plan, dated 9/17/20. Mark that A1 with today's date.
Mr. Alfieri, let me ask you, did you submit these also so that they could be shown?
This one was not submitted. This one isn't necessary if that's going to be an issue.
Well, why don't you talk if through the chair? We did this at the last meeting. If you can just position it in front of the camera,
Certainly. And let me just
please.
mark the second one. This was in the board's packet. This is the layout and dimension plan. It is dated August 24th, 2020. I'll mark that A2.
Camera's up there.
Camera's up here.
I'll hold it so you can you see it through the camera?
I'll turn it around. This is a pretty quick description. What you see here is an overall aerial, just giving the board a general idea of the surrounding properties. This is Sam's Road coming right down here. Our property is 8.2 acres, existing lot 30, which is shown in red right here. There's a small area of wetlands just to the southwest of the property, which is denoted in blue. And you can see the development of the surrounding area. Westlake is in this upper corner here, just to orient the board. You want to put it on the chair? That one?
Well, that should be able to be pulled up also on the screen if you submitted it.
Yes, this one was submitted.
County Line Construction, Sam's Road.
It's going to be page 3. It's layout and dimension plan. Should be sheet 3 of 12, I believe. Sheet 3, yes. That's it.
Perfect.
So what we're proposing here before you tonight is a conforming 5-lot residential subdivision conforming to the R1 zone. We had originally submitted to the board probably almost a year ago at this point, a 6-lot subdivision. However, we had a number of variances that were associated with that. I had quite a few discussions with Mr. Klee, and we revised the layout. We eliminated one of the lots, and we created a detention basin lot, which is on the bottom right-hand corner that you can see, that is slightly undersized, but is proposed to be dedicated to the township. We kept that as small as we could, with the township ultimately owning it to reduce the township's maintenance responsibilities there. As I mentioned, we do have the wetland area. Is it all right if I go over here so I can kind of point? We do have the wetland area down in this area. We have received an LOI from the DEP for that, and we are also proposing, can we slide that up at all? Just so we can get to the bottom. No? There we go, perfect. And our detention basin here outlets across the street and is going to outlet to that wetland area. We are going to need a permit from the NJDEP for that. We have not received approval from that yet because we actually need the township to be the co-applicant, because the actual extension of that is somewhat located within the right-of-way of Sam's Road. So as I said, we've got a 5-lot conforming subdivision. We are extending Sam's Road up into the property. That roadway extension is going to terminate with a conforming cul-de-sac bulb. All of our improvements conform to the residential site improvement standards. This is actually going to be a safety improvement. As any of you who have driven down to the end of Sam's Road, the road is somewhat beat up at the end. It's only 18 feet wide as you get down into that wooded area there. There's no safe turnaround. I don't know how a school bus could maneuver that other than backing up the road. So we are going to widen that, and we're going to tie in actually beyond the edge of our property here. We're going to bring Sam's Road all the way back and tie in and get rid of all this broken up pavement that is down at the end. I believe that was one of Mr. Klee's concerns. As I mentioned, we're going to have an infiltration basin. It's going to conform to all the DEP stormwater regulations. It's going to outlet to the wetlands. As far as public utilities, we are going to have private wells for each of these dwellings. We are proposing a packaged sewer plant, which is going to be a pump station that is going to collect sewage from the 5 houses, and it's going to pump it up Sam's Road to the existing manhole by the newer development, which is somewhere up Sam's Road here. We did do a traffic study on this area and the surrounding intersections. The traffic impacts were minimal. There was a very minimal increase when you look at all of the other residential development in the area. We're proposing landscaping and streetlights which conform to RISIS and the general surrounding area. I'd be happy to work with Mr. Klee on any additional landscaping on the detention basin if he feels that's necessary. We did submit a landscaping plan for that. We're also proposing street trees up the street. I don't believe there are any issues with Mr. Klee or Mr. Peters' comments. I think we can meet all of those. We did recently resubmit, and I believe we've addressed most of those comments at this point. We have already received Ocean County Planning Board approval, Ocean County Soils, and as I mentioned, the LOI from the DEP.
So first question is, as it relates to the proposed street vacation that's referenced on the plans, it's also referenced in the reports. Can you show the board where that's located and advise the board whether in fact that street vacation is necessary for this subdivision?
We had originally proposed to vacate the existing section of Sam's Road. It's somewhat of a strange layout. The road, Sam's Road, ends right here where this hatched area ends, but the right-of-way extends all the way to the end of our property. This is all wetlands from this area across this entire way. It's all wet. That roadway is never going to be built. So our thinking was we would simply vacate that and Sam's Road would come up and terminate into our project. That's not something we need to do. And in fact, recently I had conversation with a resident who may be calling in on Zoom later. He had some concerns on access to his property over here and what that vacation would do. We do not need that vacated. Our project conforms without the vacation. Certainly if that's something the council would like down the line, but that's not a necessity for us. And if it's going to possibly impact another property owner, I think we would probably withdraw that.
The other question relating to roadways is the reference in the reports to the 18-foot wide roadway width. The width of the road as it relates to what we're improving is RSIS compliant. Can you show the board what that 18-foot wide area represents and whether there's anything we can do about that?
Sure. The 18 feet is actually quite a bit further up Sam's Road than our property. You can see the difference in the width of our roadway here, and we are 18 feet actually in this hatched section right here. It continues up 18 feet for some distance. It then begins to widen out. I believe it's 28 feet all the way up as you get up towards Gale Chambers. 18 feet is the minimum required for residential site improvement standards, but we are proposing to extend a fully conforming roadway significantly past the property line of our property.
And while you're there, I'll stay
Oh,
here.
there we go.
Save you
That
some
works better.
steps. There was also a comment about an area within the subdivision where we're not proposing a sidewalk. Would you show the board where that is?
That's correct.
Explain.
We have the sidewalk starting from our property line here. We go up around the cul-de-sac, so we have sidewalk on both sides. We terminated the sidewalk here just because our wetlands buffer ends right here. So we were about, I don't think it was quite 50 feet, but just short of 50 feet from that wetland area. It happened to be across from the pump station we're proposing. It seemed like a good area to stop it. If you'd like us to extend it down to that wetlands buffer line, we can certainly do that. I do not foresee us being able to extend the sidewalk all the way down, but there's also no sidewalk that we're tying into on Sam's Road. So I don't know that it's really necessary.
Would you provide a little more detail on how the stormwater, the topography of the site, pre and post construction, and how the stormwater management will work?
Sure. The topography of the site basically is going to remain as it is. You have somewhat of a high point, sort of in the middle of the site, but everything drains around this way and down towards the wetlands area. We're not proposing to really change the topography of the site. To address Mr. Peters' comments, our calculations right now, the site balances. We don't anticipate any fill being brought in. If there is, that fill will be fully tested and conforming to the residential requirements. The roadway will drain all the way down to 2 inlets, which are located right here. It's going to drain into the detention basin or infiltration basin. We only anticipate outflow from that basin in the 100-year storm. So this basin is going to completely retain everything up to the 100-year storm. In the 100-year storm, it will come across the roadway and come out into an outlet here, which will go into the wetlands.
Would you get into a little more detail on the site lighting and buffering that's proposed?
Sure. We're proposing 4 street lights, which conform. There are 2 on this side here, and then we jump across the street. Provides adequate street lighting. It's actually significantly more than what is further up Sam's Road, which is really minimal. If you've been out there, it's pretty dark at night. So this site will be pretty well lit. And I'm sorry, what was, oh, and landscaping. And landscaping. We're proposing street trees at a 50-foot spacing, conforming to the township ordinance. We're also proposing buffer plantings around the basin. And again, I'll be willing to work with Mr. Klee if there's additional plantings that he feels are needed.
Now, the applicant would, of course, have to do individual plot plans for each lot as part of the building permit process.
That's correct.
So that the boxes, if you will, that are on there for houses and driveways is just a typical, it's not the actual design.
That's correct. I mean, Mr. Kate is really a custom builder. He's not building the typical shoebox house that you would see in a development where they are just cookie cutter down the road. We put in boxes that are going to show most likely the maximum size of the homes that will be built. But can I absolutely guarantee that the driveway on this house is going to be here and not on this side, and there won't be a little jut out here and a nice little patio in back? No, we'll most likely see those things on these houses.
The applicant did stipulate as part of the application, and I believe it's referenced in Mr. Peters' letter, that the applicant would agree to 2.5-story, approximate 3,000 square feet, no more than 5 bedrooms. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll agree to all that.
And in terms of basements, you haven't, the individual plot plan hasn't been done, so you don't know if there'll be basements or not, depending upon the water table.
That's correct. We are planning on basements, but we need to go out and do perk tests on each one of these lots before we can determine that.
You've mentioned briefly the variances that are associated with the basin lot. Can you get into a little more detail as to what those variances are and then the support for granting of the relief that we're asking for?
Sure. I just need to grab the other notes. So the variances required for the basin lot are for lot area. 1 acre is required, where we're proposing 0.536 acres. And also, I believe, for lot depth. Yes, where minimum lot depth is 200 feet, and we have 135 feet. As you can see, that's really a function of the layout of the property that we have here. I think, considering it's a basin lot, we could probably be looking at the C-run requirements, which would be the individual layout of the lot. We're also greatly constrained by the environmental constraints of this property. When we laid this out, we really tried to push everything on this side to stay away from the wetlands and keep the development up in that area away from the wetlands, and yet still trying to give people a usable lot area.
And you mentioned earlier that the technical comments that were set forth in the Remington-Vernick report of September 11th and Mr. Klee's report, the date I'm looking for. Of May 19th, it looks like. Doug, is that your most recent one? Okay. And you've indicated that you will address all of the technical comments contained within those reports to the satisfaction of the various professionals?
Yes, we've already resubmitted plans that I believe address all of those comments. If not all, we will agree to address all of them.
There was an email, and I don't know if the member of the public has joined in, the one who sent the email, but there was a Mr. Leister who sent an email with several questions, 9 questions or so. And I know you spoke to the gentleman. You want to sit
Yes, I did.
down next to you.
No, that's fine, just in case I need to.
You have his email? So
Yes, I do.
if I
And
can,
Mr. Alfieri, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, the board has been provided a copy of those questions, so you
Thank
can
you.
walk through it.
So if we could go one by one and just advise, you could, first of all, tell the board how you responded to the resident, but also provide the same answers to the board.
Sure, I had a nice conversation with Mr. Leister last week. His first question, why does County Line Construction's application include vacating a portion of Sam's Road? That was his concern, I believe, on the access to his property. At this point, we'll withdraw that request. That's not a function of this board, as you're well aware. That would have to go to the town council. But if that's his concern, we easily withdraw that. Can County Line Construction clean up the garbage at the end of Sam's Road from the existing storm pipe and culvert? That's down in this area, actually into the wetlands. That's not Mr. Kitay's garbage that's down there. I don't want to give you the wrong idea. That is stuff that has been dumped down there over the years. It's just kind of a dead end. Things get dumped. We will absolutely agree to work with the town and Public Works to clean that up. We're going to be having to work in this area. We'll be cleaning probably some of that up as we do our construction, but we'll absolutely work with the town on that. Do plans for replacing some of the existing CAD pipeline and culvert with new apparatus include a catch basin? Yes, we are including catch basins that are going to collect all of our rainwater and pipe it into the infiltration basin. And if so, who can maintain it? The town ultimately will be owning this roadway as well as this detention basin. Are any storm drains planned on the newly paved portion of Sam's Road, and where do they drain to? I just discussed that. What public utility services will be provided to the new subdivision? As I said, it's going to be serviced by individual private well. We are going to have a sewer line running down the street to this small pump station right here. That pump station is going to pipe up to the manhole in Sam's Road. It will also be serviced by natural gas, electric, cable. Will new homes have septic tanks or city sewer? City sewer, as we just said. Can County Line Construction move its subdivision entrance any further south along Sam's Road? We really cannot. We have tried to keep it as far out of the wetlands as we can, and I believe the DEP is going to require us to stay with this layout as we have proposed. I don't believe that they will allow us to move it any further down the lot there, as we'll just be having a further impact on the wetlands. Can the township reposition its warning no dumping signage behind or adjacent to the proposed guide rail that will lead into the new subdivision? Absolutely. In fact, we'll volunteer to put a no dumping sign right at the end of the street here where the Sam's Road right-of-way will continue.
And there were 2 follow-ups.
Yes, just have to turn the page. Can County Line Construction move its subdivision entrance about 25 feet further south along Sam's Road that allows him to do more work around the wetlands on his property? As I just indicated, no, I think the DEP is going to require us to keep this roadway as far this way. And just from a good environmental perspective, we want to stay as far away from the wetlands and that buffer as we can. And the last question, if the new subdivision has a sewer line, can it be one other than Sam's Road homes can use? I had a discussion very early on in this project with the Jackson MUA. We actually had offered the idea of, would they be willing to partner with us to put a gravity sewer in this area? It would most likely require a pump station about halfway down Sam's Road, and we were willing to make a voluntary contribution to that. Had a meeting with Dave Harpel and Bill Allman. They did not feel that they were going to move forward with that. I don't know all of their reasoning. That's why we ended up going with this plan to have our own pump station. We would certainly continue to entertain that if anybody would like to help out the cause. I think it makes sense to do that. I would think other residents in this area would like to have public sewer, but I mean, that's not something that
So just through the chair, would the applicant agree as a condition of approval to continue those discussions. Certainly at some point, whether the MUA determines or not would guide whether or not you have to pull the trigger. But I would like to memorialize your promise, because assuming the board would like to see that happen, at least take another stab at the MUA.
We think it absolutely makes sense. I think up to a certain point, we would absolutely agree to that, but we're going to reach a point where we're going to be getting ready to go to construction, and at that point, we're going to need to know one way or the other.
And one other follow-up I just mentioned to the chair. I know you're talking a little bit about the vacation of Sam's Road and the idea that, you don't need it. My first question to you would be, what's the effect on the care of that portion that's not vacated, if it's not vacated?
It's wooded, right?
Yes, it's
all
wooded right
wooded.
now. It's wooded and it's all wetlands.
But the township would obviously still, at some level, continue to own it.
Yes.
So from a design perspective, can you build and I'm spitballing this, obviously, sort of like a spur to the particular homeowner who's trying to be protected, and still at least petition the municipality to vacate the balance of that? If the board, again, would, and I know the administrator's waiting to chime in maybe, but
I don't. No, I understand where you're going. I don't believe we can build a spur. So you're talking about coming off this way if the town ever wanted to go that way. I don't think we're going to get a permit for that. The wetlands line really is coming up right to here, and our buffer actually comes out into the roadway. So we're going to need a DEP
just to
permit for that.
if I may fine tune the question, what my question is about is how much can you do to protect that homeowner and still vacate potentially the balance of that road?
Meaning vacate a portion of Sam's and leave some of it in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, any line that the town wants us to stop at, we could do.
Yep.
Where's that property owner's property?
I am not entirely sure where his property ends up this way. I mean, I think any access for him is going to have to come in this area right here. Just from my experience, I don't see anybody getting a DEP permit to come down into the wetlands here. This is a tributary. It says right on here, a named tributary to the Dove Mill branch.
But then it would make sense to vacate that, because then the other homeowners would have to maintain it.
Yes. So either way, I mean, if the board would like, we will go and ask the town council to vacate that right of way.
Mr. Chair, if I may briefly, and this will, I think, dial in our planner and/or engineer. The question of sewers and availability of sewers, Mr. Udakis had just referenced that. If we were in Colts Neck right now, this meeting would probably be shut down. The notion of public sewers as a conversation, but of course, let's do that. It really depends on what community you're in, and it depends on the land use prerogatives of the community. Because this wouldn't fly in Colts Neck to talk about public sewering and not take into account the incredibly evolved conversation, which is not for tonight at all, of to what extent do you want to facilitate exceptional density in your community? Look at Route 35 in Homedale, look at the Grand in Colts Neck, and look at any number of communities where the public sewer facilities are made available. And you can very quickly see, and I'll let the planner speak to this because I had to kind of stop for a moment before we go further on properties. Don't think about this property. Think about the daisy chain of impacts of layering out that sewer line and the broader conversation on a macro level, to the extent that it fits into your master plan, the overall governing body prerogatives from council and the boards, respective boards, and that kind of thing. That is a huge, huge question. And that's why I referenced Colts Neck. Mr. Udakis knows very well from where I'm speaking. So with that, if we may briefly, that question for the planner, am I off track, on track? Is this a broader discussion about adjoining properties, sewer, and the relationship to density?
That's correct. There's always going to be a conversation. If you have public sewer, you can build on smaller lots. Quite frankly, that's true here in the R1 zone. It says, after 1990, if you're in the R1 zone, you're on septic, it's 3-acre lot. If you're on R1 with sewer, it's a 1-acre lot. So there's 3 times as much density when you bring sewer in. I can stop there. We can go on the conversation that this is the planning board, and then there's a governing body, and then there's an MUA, and there's a sewer service area map. And none of those things, quite frankly, are the purview of the planning board. But suffice it to say, from a density perspective, when you're in the R1 zone on undeveloped land, you can get 3 times as much density when you run sewer. Fair enough?
Fair enough, yes.
And that, which means that we would keep our application the way we originally proposed and just run the sewer line to accommodate the 5 lots that are being proposed here. We're not seeking additional density because we can provide the sewer to service this development.
Well, and Mr. Chair, it's not my role to say what the board should or should not do. I'm sharing with you that, and I've been through these massive confrontational, combative conversations from a land use perspective in multiple municipalities, and especially how it ties into builders' remedy lawsuits, affordable housing mandates, 20% set-asides, and having Sal leave the office and Hill Wallach come in to pick up where the plaintiff's attorneys start with some of the development applications throughout the state. So I'm just sharing that that's a significant point of departure with public sewer. I think you'd probably agree.
And if I can comment, I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Wall. I mean, Colts Neck is near and dear to my heart. I was born and raised there. I've been involved with the fight that we're having right now with sewers potentially being run in for builders' remedy lawsuits and to address the Mount Laurel issues. Just so you're aware, if we have gravity sewer run here, it doesn't help us at all. We don't get any extra lots. We're not pushing for that. Does absolutely nothing for us here. That's an opportunity. The reason I saw it from a planning standpoint, most of Sam's Road down this way is already built out. So it was one of those things, hey, if the town was ever considering that, if the MUA wanted to do it, we'll give you a contribution in lieu of us putting in our little force main. That was the only thought there. It doesn't help us.
And
Terrence, you okay with?
No, thank you.
And that actually concluded our presentation. We think we covered all the professional comments. And of course, Mr. Udakis is here for any questions you or the public have.
Okay, questions from the board? Ms. Campbell?
Are you building garages? Garages? Are you building garages?
Yes, we're proposing garages.
And the garages will be used as garages?
I'm assuming we would, yes. I
They'll
can't,
have garage doors on them?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
There'll be conforming garages to meet the building code.
Yes.
2 or 3 car garages. They're not sure, again, depending upon the customization of the home, but minimum 2.
Minimum of 2 car garages.
Right? Minimum 2. And-
Great. Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
2 questions. The first is, are the utilities going to be underground?
yes.
And who's responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the pump station once it's built?
That's to be determined. The MUA has told us that they did not want to maintain a small pump station like this. So in that case, if they're going to continue that stand, we're going to have to form an HOA to manage that pump station. From a practical standpoint, I don't feel that that's a great thing. A small homeowners association like this usually is not a great solution to manage a pump station or a detention basin or something like this. So sometimes those improvements end up falling back to the township or the MUA. But it's going to be the MUA's call as to what they want us to do there.
Yes.
How are you going to buffer the retention rate or detention basin on the property line? It looks like the chain link fence goes within several feet of the property line.
Yes, it does.
How are you going to buffer it?
So we have a planting plan. Most of our buffering was on this side. We could certainly buffer further on this side, and we can also plant on some of the slope of that detention basin there.
And the only other question I have, I don't know if I'm reading it wrong or it's just too fault for my eye. The radius of the cul-de-sac. Two of the radius lines that have say 50, the other one says 0. The one at about 8 o'clock says 40.
I believe it's 40 feet and 50 feet is the right-of-way line. So the actual pavement will be a 40-foot radius. Let me just verify here. That's conforming to the residential site improvement standards.
So the question is, in a 50-foot right-of-way, could we put a 42-foot radius pavement and still keep the curved sidewalk within the 50-foot right-of-way?
Potentially. I mean, that's kind of a difficult question to answer here on the spot without looking at the grading of it. Is there a specific concern? I mean, have you had problems with fire trucks or buses turning around? Okay. All right. It absolutely is. I'll volunteer that we will take another look at it and we'll make that radius as large as we can and still maintain that 50-foot right-of-way.
Anyone else?
Chairman, I have a couple quick questions.
Sure.
This may have been already resolved earlier with the dates on the memos. On page 5 of the review from Remington Vernick, it references that the proposed subdivision, that I believe your document says it's a permitted use utilizing the cluster provision. And just stating that's inaccurate because it's a minimum of 10 acres. Is that already resolved, that piece?
Is that an older report?
This is dated August 21st. Oh, this is old. Yeah, this is old.
Yeah,
This just came in the package.
Yes, we had originally submitted it as the cluster provision, but with the public sewer, we meet the 1 acre requirements.
Okay. And one other item, just to reconcile it, there were references to street trees not located on property lines, and you had referenced, I think, street trees on property lines. Maybe it's not that relevant, but I wanted to ask that, and then a question on trees.
I believe we relocated trees in our last submission.
I'm sorry?
Yes, we did. We revised the tree locations so that they were not directly on property lines. I believe we had 2 of those in one of the earlier plans.
Okay. And so what was the resolution then?
Yes, the plans have already been revised to meet that requirement, so the
Okay.
trees are not on the property lines.
Are you familiar with plus or minus how many trees there are and how many are going to be cut down and what the caliper size is average?
We have not done a tree count yet. That is a requirement. We've already had discussions with the township forester, and we've agreed on what areas we are going to go out and mark. And we're going to have to do that tree count and comply with the ordinance.
It's highly covered, right? With trees?
Oh, yes.
Because in your report, you say that the disruption would be temporary, then it would no longer be temporary, but when we have that tree plan, we would know the count, right? To know whether it's permanent or not, or you'd be donating to a tree fund, or is there?
Yes. For every tree that we don't replant, I believe we have to donate to the tree fund. We actually have to go out and we have to do 2 100 by 100 areas, and we have to go out and count every tree. I mean, we just did it with another application. We have 1 here and 1 here in this area. We mark those out. We go out and count the trees, and then the township forester goes out and verifies the count that we did. We agree upon that number. We then count up the number of street trees and the number of buffer trees that we're planting. And if there's any type of a difference, it's a fee that needs to be paid. I will note, we have tried to selective clear this as best we can. You can almost see kind of the strange tree clearing line that we've had here. We have tried to maintain as many trees as we can on this site.
And for the planner, did this go to the Environmental Commission yet to review things of that nature or any other relevant environmental committee, particularly since it's so tree covered?
The plan certainly go to the environmental commission. I don't know if we have a report from them or not.
Mr. Klee refers to environmental considerations in his letter, but I'm not sure if they're environmental commission or.
We submitted to the Environmental Commission. I know I had gotten comments back that they said some inconsistencies on the environmental impact statement. We revised that and resubmitted. So, I mean, if they'd like me to attend an Environmental Commission meeting along with my permitting officer, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. I gather really it was more sequencing there. So there's no vote anticipated this evening. There's still an ongoing process of environmental commission meeting and getting data on the tree coverage or the level of clearing.
Typically, we can still vote regardless of these other outside agencies, but everything is contingent on their approval.
Yeah, that's correct. We have to comply with your tree removal ordinance. You don't have discretion to give us relief from that, nor can we ask you for it. Whatever the ordinance says, we have to comply with. And the Environmental Commission, whatever comments they ultimately have, we're going to meet them, and that would be a condition of approval.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Questions? Yes.
May 22nd, 2019, comments from the Environmental Commission, feeling that this is probably the original set of plans that they reviewed, and we want another updated letter from the Environmental Commission based on the current.
Yep. Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Question is this a letter that you've seen and you addressed this already?
Yes, and we have resubmitted back to the Environmental Commission. I just checked today, I believe it was their September, or maybe it was August minutes, that they said they still had some questions. That's why I'm volunteering to go to the meeting if that's going to help our case. But we're going to need to get approval from them one way or another, yes. Yes. Yeah, I would imagine typically like Ocean. Yes. Yeah, we would ask for that to be an outside agency approval, just like Ocean County Soils or something like that.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to open this up to residents. May I have a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do we have any residents? No? No one raising their hand?
There was someone from the public who was here because they thought that the Zoom was off because you were in closed session. She did go home and she said that she was going to log back in. She had a drainage question. She lives above the property. We explained to her how the stormwater management and how our basin's 10 feet lower than her property and everything runs down away from her. So she may not have called in because we've explained it, but I just wanted to make sure that we did speak.
Did you get this person's last name?
No,
I did.
unfortunately,
Yeah,
no. She lives
Yes.
right above this site.
Yeah, she lived, here, can I do this? Up in this area right here. And she said when the road that is behind us in this area was extended, her and one of her neighbors had problems with the water table, and they had water in their basement, and they had to increase their sump pumps, some improvements there at quite an expense. What I explained to her was our property generally drains completely away from them into the wetland area. And if you look at our detention basin here, the elevation they are up here, I went back and looked at the numbers, it's in excess of 12 feet differential. So they are 12 feet higher up in that area than where all of our stormwater is going. And our stormwater also either infiltrates here or goes to the wetlands. So I don't see any way that our water could be affecting them.
Okay. And she was all right with that?
I don't know. Is she on now? Is somebody on? Oh, is there a hand raised? Oh, maybe. We'll find out.
Okay.
Yes, My name is Alan Lister, and I wanted to,
Sir, hang on one second if you don't mind. We'll take your word that you're raising your right hand, but do you solemnly swear or affirm that testimony or information or questions you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you give us your full name, spell your last, and your street address, please?
Yes, my name is Alan Lister, and last name is spelled Lyster. My property is 101 Sam's Road, which is block number 20201, lot number 1.
Okay.
Okay, my question has to do with the decommissioning of a portion of Sam's Road. I did hear Mr. Yudakis's testimony, how the plans are currently laid out. I was just appealing if perhaps there is some wiggle room for the entranceway to be shifted a little bit further south along the existing Sam's Road. The reason for that is my property buffers up against Sam's Road. It's all wetlands. And my accessibility from Sam's Road to the back portion of my lot, which is the highlands, requires just a little more footage for me to get to that optimal spot where the minimal disruption of wetlands would occur for my crossing.
As I said before, I don't believe that we are going to get a DEP permit to shift this road any further to the south. I do think if Mr. Lister is going to access his property, it's probably going to be in this area right here, and he's probably need some type of a wetlands crossing. I know his usable area is back in here. I don't think we're going to get a permit, and I don't think it's a really environmentally responsible thing for us to do to continue to push this into the wetlands here. I understand his concern. I think our project is actually going to help his access because we're going to have a nice new road here on what is his usable frontage. But I just don't agree that we can push this further south.
Okay.
Please, do you guys agree with that?
Be problematic as far as getting the permits and
Doug, you have to use the mic, please.
sorry. I don't think it'd be possible to push the road any further. They are constrained by the wetlands. They did get a general permit or getting a general permit to allow them to do what they are proposing. DEP is always looking to minimize impacts, so I really don't see DEP approving any additional encroachments into the wetlands. And as Al noted, there is frontage on the, I'll say the reconstruction portion of Sand Road that the adjacent property owner can use to access his property.
Mr. Lister, do you have any other questions or comments?
Just one other question. If everything goes through as hoped for and planned, when would the applicant expect to break ground to begin the project?
It's probably some time yet. I would imagine it won't be this year. Best case would be next spring. We still need to get through the DEP and finish out all our permits with the township. So I would say best case next spring.
Okay.
That's optimistic.
I think that is optimistic.
Okay, is there anyone else that's raising their hand over there? Go ahead.
Hello?
Hello?
All right, just want to make sure we were doing this correctly. It's our first Zoom. This is Renee Hine and my husband Keith Hine. I was there speaking to the engineer and the builder earlier this evening, so we were not able to get onto the Zoom.
Okay, let me stop you just for one moment. We need
Sure.
to swear you in.
Ma'am, we're presuming you're raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that testimony, information, or questions you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes,
If you could please give us your full name, spell your last, and your street address, please.
sure. It's Renee, Renee. Last name is Hein, Hein. Street address is 17 Dove Mill Crescent.
Go ahead, ma'am.
So our concern was about the impact that this building is going to have on the water table in the area. When we bought the house over 20 years ago, we were told that the property behind us was not buildable because it was wetlands. In that 20 years, Meadow Run has been built, and that has impacted the water table and not our basement. Houses to the end of the cul-de-sac have both had significant water damage, continuous flooding. Our direct neighbor next door had to spend almost $50,000 to have their basement remediated, French drains put in, and my understanding is 3 sump pumps that are continuously running. We have a sump pump that runs pretty regularly, but we don't have nearly the water issue that our 2 neighbors have. Our concern is that now we have more building going on between us in close proximity to those wetlands, and more tree removal, more non-permeable surfaces. And I understand that Mr. Katay has a right to build on his property, but we are concerned with the reduction in size of the retention basin because that's supposed to help mitigate some of those water issues. So what is the rationale for reducing the size of the retention basin in an area adjacent to the wetlands where we already have a water issue in the adjacent neighborhoods?
Well, we're not anticipating making our infiltration basin any smaller. I mean, the basin has stayed the same size pretty much throughout our design, although we've tweaked it slightly. So I am not really sure where you're coming from there. As I described previously, and this was the lady we met out before the meeting, her property is, as we saw before, to the upper left. The road that she's talking about is actually higher than her development, which is just to the northeast of us. I'm pretty familiar with the area. I could see how that development could drain towards her property and could have caused her problems. I mean, as far as commitments that were made 20 years ago from a realtor to her saying it could never be built, I can't comment on that, but I understand hearing something like that. I could see how those improvements could impact her. All of our water is draining away from their property down to our infiltration basin. And as I said before, our basin is 10 to 12 feet lower than what their elevation is. I don't see how this could impact either surface water or the water table on their property. Even if we were to do a groundwater mounting analysis in this area, I've never seen that go more than 200, 250 feet to increase a water table. And that would be, what we saw before, no more than this area right here. I mean, nowhere near their property.
I'm not able to see the map that you're referring to right now. And I am the neighbor that you spoke to outside the room earlier this evening. And my understanding was that one of the variances that you're requesting is to reduce the size of the retention basin from 1 acre to 0.536 or something like that.
Yeah,
Is that not correct?
those are variances that we requested for a lot size for the basin. So we only needed a basin that was about 1/2 of an acre. So the lot that we are donating to the town, we kept it just slightly over 1/2 of an acre. But the basin has been designed to completely retain up to the 100-year storm within the basin. And only during the 100-year storm will it outlet to the wetlands. So no, there has been no reduction in the size of our basin starting from our original design until today.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Do you have any other questions, ma'am?
No, thank you. I don't believe so.
Thank you. One more, go ahead.
They dropped off? No one else? How many people are participating right now? 11. And no further comments? He was the one that already spoke? Okay. The email that you sent me was that woman that was just on the phone, so that's negates that. Okay, seeing no more hands raised, I'd like to close public comment. May I have a motion, please? Second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, anyone from the board have any further questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
Back to the pump station issue. I know it hasn't been decided yet who's going to be responsible for the maintenance of that, but if it does get pushed back on the town and that pump station malfunctions in 5 or 6 years, are the taxpayers of Jackson going to have to fund 5 houses?
Well, it wouldn't be the town, it would be the Jackson Township MUA and the ratepayers. Yes, that would be part of the whole application process with the JTMUA.
Okay, so the taxpayers in Jackson wouldn't have to be stuck paying for
Well, the ratepayers take over all maintenance of all the public improvements, sewer improvements. So, yeah, the ratepayers would pay for any sewer infrastructure that's taken over by the JTMUA, whether it be that pump station or anything else.
Anyone else? No?
So, Mr. Chair, we do need guidance on 2 points, if I can, just to make sure we have clarity. The first was the vacation of Sam's Road, if we vacate any of it or a portion of it. And then the second is the sewer. I'm assuming based upon the colloquy that took place with Mr. Wall, we're going to leave the sewer as proposed, and we're not going to increase the sewer capacity for any other neighbors. But those are 2 things we need you to consider as part of your deliberations.
Mr. Peters, any comment on those?
Again, the MUA has jurisdiction as to who gets serviced. If someone wants to petition to be serviced by the sewer, my understanding of the process for asking for sewer is you go to the provider, which is the MUA. That's not anything that would be a condition of an approval for this application. If at some point, everyone who was on septic, going back out to Gale Chambers, decided they wanted to be on sewer, and 30 people showed up at the MUA and said, all of our septics are ready to fail, let's hook up to sewer, then the MUA would come back to this applicant and say, okay, let's make a deal with regards to where the pump station is going to be and how big it is. According to the testimony of Mr. Yodakis, they approached the MUA. The MUA said no. And so I think they've done what they need to do in terms of facilitating this land use application before the board.
Okay. All right, then. Do you have anything?
Well, Sam's Road, we offered to withdraw the vacation concept completely, or something less than that or more than that we'd be willing to do. It's really, it's the governing body's call, but if it's not a condition of approval, then the vacation is no longer relevant and we wouldn't even go to the governing body.
Mr. Chairman, can the attorney explain the positive and negative aspects of vacation and simplify the rationale to agree or not agree or think about it further?
Okay.
From the, thank you, Mr. Wall, Mr. Chairman, from the planning board's perspective, in my opinion, to ask the governing body to vacate some or all of the existing Sam's Road right-of-way would be a benefit to the municipality, because in the broadest context, where that roadbed now lies, where that...
And I'm sorry, for many, they already understand it, but could you define vacation of.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, just
I
right
didn't-
from, you know, just
okay.
for any folks who are new
So-
or interested in the
Sorry
detail.
about that. I apologize. So
Sorry.
vacation of a roadway is giving up the rights to that roadbed itself to ultimately build that road. So given the fact that, as the testimony indicates, that it's through wetlands in any event, right now, at some level, it's the municipality's responsibility to care for that paper road, street, that roadbed. So it would, in my opinion, would make sense to, as a condition of approval, to ask the municipality to make the ultimate determination about whether or not that, that roadbed would be vacated, i.e. given to the future homeowners per lot as it exists along the right of way.
Yes, I understand
Okay.
it. I just thought it would
I
be
just
good
want-
for all the
yeah.
folks and anybody on Zoom to understand what the concept is and to think about it.
And as indicated, it's ultimately the municipality's discussion in any event. So the condition of, since it's not necessary for the development, the condition would be conditional, if I can change that word, that they would have, the developer would have an obligation to approach the municipality for a yay or nay as to the determination. If they said yes, there'd be one set of circumstances. If the municipality decides against it, they could move ahead.
And to facilitate the conversation, if it's appropriate, Mr. Alfieri can contact Mr. McGuckin on the township side and have a discussion. We have a meeting tomorrow evening, and then we have a meeting in 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
perhaps you can have that discussion and they can contemplate it.
That's fine. The only thing is, as long as the condition, assuming we get approval, is that we'll ask. We just don't want it to be conditioned upon the granting of that because we have no control over it and it doesn't really affect our subdivision. But we'd certainly go to Mr. McGuckin and the governing body and request it if that's what you want us to do.
It's fine. Okay. Anybody else? No? No more discussion? Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve pursuant to the rest of the rules and requirements.
Okay? Any comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Nigro?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Riccardi? Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations,
Thank
gentlemen. Okay, we have to circle back. We have a block 4201, lot 3, Cedar Swamp Plaza LLC. They requested a movement to, Denise, is it November 2nd that we're going to go with on this? November 2nd meeting. So I need a motion to move this application to November 2nd. There will be no further notice required.
Mr. Chairman, there would be, because so long as we're utilizing the Zoom, the address changes.
Oh,
So they would
okay.
have to,
Okay.
they would have to notify. They would have to notify because the Zoom address changes. Yep. So
Got it.
they would have to
Okay.
notify.
Times have changed. Okay, may I have a motion to move block 4201, lot 3, Cedar Swamp Plaza to our November 2nd meeting?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Mr. Nigro? Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Riccardi? Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes. And next we have block 3601, lots 2, 3, 5, and 6, Macedonia Baptist Church. They are requesting to meet with us on November 16th. May I have a motion to reschedule that, please? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Mr. Nigro? Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming? Mr. Riccardi? Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes. And lastly, we have block 5301, lot 12, 146 North County Line Road, LLC. This is initial testimony of a one-year time extension. Gentlemen, Mr. Klee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, this is a time extension application of a preliminary and final major site plan, Resolution 2016-07, granted preliminary and final site plan approval for the construction of a 13,809 square foot office and retail building. It was 9,922 square feet devoted to a medical office. Based on the provisions of the municipal land use law, the original approval or the protection period would run until May 2nd, 2018. And the applicant's requesting an extension of the protection period to May 2nd, 2021.
Mr. Peters?
Chairman, when the property was approved, it was located in the HC Highway Commercial Zone. It is still in the HC Highway Commercial Zone, so it is still a permitted use in the zone and properly before the planning board.
Thank you. Good evening.
Mr. Chairman,
are
board
you?
members, thank you. My name is Gregory Hawk. I'm an attorney in Toms River, New Jersey, here on behalf of applicant 146 North County Line Road, LLC. The board professional's overview is correct. Essentially, we are here simply for our third statutory extension under the municipal land use law, section 52. This would be our third and final statutory exception. We did receive a letter from Owen Little's office that just asked us to clarify a couple of points. Of course, we're happy to do that. Beginning with the need for the extension, of course, we want to protect, we want the period of protection to extend. It doesn't sound like the zoning has changed, so you know, this is really an extra bit of protection, but what we would seek it anyway as it is a big project. They also, the board professionals also asked if there's any proposed modifications. No, at this point, no. Or the plan is what it is before the board by the prior resolution of approval. We're just looking to extend that existing, that approval with all variances and conditions, of course, of approval that were in the original resolution. That brings their next point, that we agree to comply with all conditions in the prior approval, of course. Outside agencies, we will be getting them, still working on them, some of them. And of course, taxes will be paid up if they haven't already for this application, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody raising their hand or anybody still participating? No one, okay. With that, anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? No? Can I get a motion, please?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dolan? Dr. Campbell? Mr. Nigro? Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Riccardi? Mr. Herring?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Congratulations.
Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
We're done. Thank you, everyone.